Hi, my name is Alexis Beal and I will be talking about media evaluation. Media bias. According to What is Media Bias, an article written by Julie Masterin, media bias, the tendency of news media to report in a way that reinforces a viewpoint, worldview, preferences, political ideology, corporate or financial interest, moral framework, or policy inclination instead of reporting in an objective way. A media outlet may reveal bias in how it reports specific news stories or which stories they choose to cover, i.e., deem more important than others to cover or emphasize. Media bias shapes how we perceive the world, from selection and framing to ideological leanings. Bias impacts public opinion, polarizes society, and undermines trust in institutions. Understanding these forms of bias is crucial for navigating today's complex media landscape. Now we're going to talk about the media bias chart. As I looked at the all sides media bias chart, I noticed TV networks my family likes to watch. So based off that, I made my decision on the five outlets I was going to use. From the left side, I chose MSNBC. From the lean left, I chose NPR. From the center, I chose News Nation. From the lean right, I chose Fox Business. From the right side, I chose The Blaze. Now we're going to talk about LLCRR. What does it mean to have a left media bias? Sources with a left all sides media bias rating display a bias in ways that strongly align with liberal, progressive, or left-wing thought and or policy agendas. Some of these sources may be considered left-wing news. What does it mean to have a lean left media bias? Sources with a lean left all sides media bias rating display biases in ways that moderately align with liberal, progressive, or left-wing thought and or policy agenda. A lean left bias is a moderately liberal rating on the political spectrum. What does it mean to have a center media bias? Sources with a center all side media bias rating either do not show much political bias or display a balance of articles with left and right perspectives. What does it mean to have a lean right media bias? Sources with a lean right all side media bias rating display media bias in a way that moderately aligns with conservative, traditional, liberating, or right-wing thought and or policy agendas. A lean right bias is a moderately conservative rating on the political spectrum. What does it mean to have a right media bias? Sources with a right all-side media bias rating display media bias in ways that strongly align with conservative, traditional, or right-wing thought and or policy agendas. Some of these sources or writers may be considered right-wing news. Now that we know what each of these mean, we can move on to each outlet and how they present their media bias through Charlie Kirk's death. MSNBC. Charlie Kirk is depicted as a prominent conservative figure whose death occurred during a public event at Utah Valley University. The article emphasizes the emotional and political fallout, quoting leaders across the spectrum from Donald Trump to Democratic governors who condemn the violence. It frames the incident as a political assassination, suggesting ideological motives and national significance. The piece highlights Kirk's influence, noting his role as CEO or Turning Point USA, CEO of Turning Point USA, and his massive social media following. MSNBC uses ethos by quoting authoritative figures like President Trump, Governor Cox, and the FBI to establish credibility. Pathos is woven throughout with emotional details about Kirk's age, family, and the national mourning that followed. Logical appeal, or logos, include a clear timeline of events and context about Kirk's public persona. The framing emphasizes ideological tension, repeatedly labeling the incident as a political assassination to suggest broader cultural significance. Lastly, the diction and tone remain serious and emotional resonant, balancing journalistic restraint with human empathy. NPR. NPR reports Kirk's death as a tragic shooting at a public event, focusing on verified details and ongoing investigations. The article avoids sensationalism, instead offering real-time updates and context about Kirk's political role. It acknowledges Kirk's influence as a conservative activist but maintains journalistic neutrality in describing his legacy. The coverage expands to include public reaction, especially the divisive and sometimes hostile comments on social media. NPR uses ethos by citing law enforcement and official sources to establish credibility and trust. Pathos appears subtly through mentions of Kirk's age, family, and the polarized public's reaction, including grief and disturbing celebratory comments. Logos is reflected in the structured timeline and contextual background on Kirk's activism. The framing emphasizes ideological tension and political violence without sensationalizing the event or labeling it as a political assassination. The diction and tone remain neutral and factual, balancing emotional resonance with journalistic restraint. NewsNation. NewsNation portrays Charlie Kirk's death as a politically explosive event that triggered national debate over free speech and ideological extremism. Using emotionally charged language and framing that emphasizes cultural division, it employs ethos through eyewitness accounts and institutional responses, pathos via public outrage and consequences, and logos through coverage of policy reactions. NewsNation used ethos by citing eyewitnesses, school officials, and legal authorities to establish credibility and urgency. Pathos is strong throughout, highlighting emotional fallout like student expulsions and community grief to invoke outrage and sympathy. Logos appears in the cause and effect structure, showing how Kirk's death led to disciplinary actions and national debate. The framing centers on free speech and ideological extremism, portraying that the event as a cultural flashpoint rather than an isolated tragedy. Diction is dramatic and tone is provocative, using charged language to emphasize the stakes and stir public's reaction. Fox Business. Fox Business portrays Charlie Kirk's death as the loss of a conservative icon and visionary leader, emphasizing his entrepreneurial rise and political influence. The article uses ethos through institutional credibility, pathos via tributes and legacy framing, and logos by detailing Turning Point USA's growth and impact. Fox Business uses ethos by referencing Turning Point USA's financial success, Kirk's connection to major donors, and his appearance at high-profile conservative events. Pathos is strong in the memorial tone, emphasizing Kirk's young age, family, and tributes from figures like President Trump, to invoke admiration and grief. Logos appears through statistics about TPUSA's reach and revenue, illustrating Kirk's tangible impact on conservative youth activism. The framing positions Kirk's death as a national loss and a rallying point for the movement he built. Diction is reverent and tone is admiring, using celebratory language to honor his legacy and inspire continued support. Blaze Media. The Blaze portrays Charlie Kirk's death as a spiritual and cultural reckoning, framing it as a clash between good and evil in America. It uses ethos through religious authority, pathos via moral urgency, and framing that casts Kirk as a martyr in a cosmic battle. The Blaze uses ethos by invoking Christian leaders and biblical references to establish spiritual authority and credibility. Pathos is central, with emotionally charged language portraying Kirk's death as a martyrdom and a sign of spiritual warfare. Logos is expressed through moral reasoning and scriptural interpretation rather than empirical data. The framing casts the event as a clash between divine truth and secular decline, positioning Kirk as a symbol in a cosmic battle. Diction is apocalyptic and tone is prophetic, urging readers towards spiritual awakening and cultural resistance. These are my street journalists. YouTube is one of the sources I used. The YouTube channel I used was JER Clips. Joe Rogan's YouTube video on Charlie Kirk's death uses emotional charged language and frames the event as ideological persecution, contrasting sharply with the restrained tone of mainstream outlet like NPR and News Nation. While traditional media focuses on verified facts, official statements, and legacy, Joe emphasizes outrage, conspiracy, and cultural conflict. His rhetorical style leans heavily on pathos and framing, engaging viewers through direct appeals and provocative questions. Unlike mainstream journalism's passive consumption model, Joe fosters active audience participation through comments, shares, and emotional reactions. This comparison reveals how independent creators shape narratives through personal ideology and emotional resonance rather than institutional credibility. Another source I used was TikTok. The TikTok creator is @LucasTheJones. Lucas Jones offers a culturally embedded, emotionally resonant take on Charlie Kirk's death that contrasts sharply with the institutional tone of outlets like NPR or Fox Business. His approach reflects how Gen Z creators use humor, critique, and platform-native tools to shape public discourse, often with more immediacy and relatability than traditional journalism. The last street journalism source I used was Instagram. The Instagram influencer's at is Emmanuel Acho. Emmanuel Acho's reel offers a deeply personal and spiritual interpretation of Charlie Kirk's death, contrasting sharply with the fact-based, legacy-focused tone of outlets like NPR or Fox Business. This independent approach reflects how creators use emotional resonance and cultural identity to engage their audiences, often with more immediacy and ideological clarity than traditional journalism. Public responses. The first public response I got was from a Gen Z liberal. Their response is, "This is tragic, but we need to talk about the hate Kirk spread." I analyzed critical tone shaped by progressive value and digital activism. The second response I got was from a millennial conservative, and their response was, "Charlie was a hero. The left is celebrating his death. Disgusting." Through analyzing, I got defensive and emotional, shaped by political loyalty and social media echo chambers. The third response I got was from a Gen X moderate, and their response was, "I didn't agree with him, but no one deserves this." I analyzed and got nuanced, empathetic, shaped by civic values and media literacy. The fourth response was from a baby boomer evangelical. Their response was, "Charlie stood for Christian truth. His death is spiritual warfare." I analyzed and got religious framing shaped by cultural conservatism and faith-based media. My fifth response is from an immigrant progressive, and their response is, "This shows how dangerous political extremism is on all sides." And analyzed global perspective shaped by lived experience and concern for democracy. That's all, and thank you for watching.